Alright guys, welcome back. We're going to be doing another game discussion today. This will be the second part of my game discussion series. The first time I did one of these I was discussing my favorite series, which was Dragon Quest. And now I'm going to be discussing what used to be my second favorite series, but if I really think about it now, it might have fallen behind the Lunar games as my second favorite RPG series of all time. And today we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy. Now, back in the day, Final Fantasy was a force to be reckoned with. It was really neck and neck with Dragon Quest as my favorite series. And I think a lot of that has to go with the fact that Dragon Quest was an NX game and Final Fantasy was a Squaresoft game, and the two companies were, they were the most popular RPGs of their day. So they had to, battle each other for that supremacy. And they pushed each other forward. And, now that it's all Square Enix and they're both the same company, while Dragon Quest has stayed very, very good, Final Fantasy has kind of lost itself in a way. And I'm going to discuss that. This first part is going to be just up until Part 5, and then Part 2 will be just about Final Fantasy VI. And then after that, I'll discuss the rest of the Final Fantasies. And I'm just going to stick to the numbered games, because there's a lot of games that Squaresoft puts out that they just tag the Final Fantasy name on to make some sales. But back in the day, this was probably one of the most advanced RPGs out for the Nintendo Entertainment System. The Master System had Phantasy Star. This was kind of our Phantasy Star for us Nintendo kids, because, Dragon Quest was very vague in its storyline. Well, this actually had a storyline that you had to follow. It was still pretty vague for the time, but, that was pretty crazy to have an actual storyline with characters, and, while the main four people you had, you named them yourself and they're kind of generic characters, the people in the world had actual names. Like, I still remember Garland, the evil knight in the beginning of the game. But this was a fantastic game. You picked your four characters from a set list of jobs, and then as you play through the game, those jobs actually do evolve and the people do get stronger. Playing this now is a bit of a, I don't want to say a chore, but it's a little difficult to get into this now because it is such an archaic RPG. And one of the easier ways to find it, this might not be easy to find anymore, but is Final Fantasy Origins, which has Final Fantasy 1 and Final Fantasy 2, the Japanese Final Fantasy 2. You can also find Final Fantasy 1 on the PSP. I see a lot of those at like Best Buys in the bargain bins. And I believe there was a port for the Game Boy Advance. But Final Fantasy 1 is a pretty great game, and I look back on it really fondly, and it still holds up for me to this day. The next game we got, and the only version I have of it is on this, Final Fantasy Origins, is Final Fantasy 2. Now, this is not the Super Nintendo one. This is still on the NES. But this was where Square first tried to really change up the Final Fantasy, formula. Leveling up is a lot different in this game. You level up by basically doing skills. Like if you want your people to get stronger, you just keep attacking and the attacks will get stronger. If you want people to become magic users, use their magic and their magic will build up. The weird thing about it though is to build up your HP, you have to get hit by monsters. Now, this kind of sounds okay, but one of the best ways to build up your HP is just to attack your own party members, which is weird in an RPG to do. But this was kind of, very advanced for its time, because it almost is like a sandbox RPG. You can travel anywhere in the world as long as you have, the canoe or the boat or all that kind of stuff, because the monsters actually kind of leveled with you. So it really was a sandbox RPG and way ahead of its time, but most people don't look back on it very fondly. And then we never got this until the DS version. This is Final Fantasy III, the real Final Fantasy III, Japanese Final Fantasy III, and this introduced the job system. Now, Final Fantasy had kind of been building up storyline-wise. Like the storyline in Final Fantasy II is very in-depth for its day. This one, I haven't got to run the planet yet, but I've heard that the storyline kind of takes a back seat and the job system and the gameplay mechanics really take over. So, I don't know, I'm playing through Solita Robo on the DS now, but I'm really kind of feeling like I want to play a new Final Fantasy. So, after I usually switch off between the DS and the PSP, so after I play a PSP game, I'll probably go back to this, because I have been wanting to give this a try for a while now, and it just keeps getting pushed back and back. But that leads us to the next game we got, which in America, this was referred to as Final Fantasy II. However, it was Final Fantasy IV in Japan. I do not have a Super Nintendo cartridge of Final Fantasy II because I have many versions of Final Fantasy IV, and it's just not a priority right now. But I think I will get one eventually just to complete the set. But this is where the Final Fantasy series got amazing. The Super Nintendo era was really good to Final Fantasy. And the storyline in this, most people say it is still their favorite storyline. I think it's up there, but it's not as good as 6 for me. But there's many ways you guys can get a hold of it. This right here I have is a Super Famicom cart, because I wanted all the games in the original Super Famicom cartridges. The newest way to get it is the Final Fantasy IV Complete Collection, which they did do a pseudo-sequel to Final Fantasy IV with the After Years. And in this, you get an enhanced port of Final Fantasy IV, you get the After Years, and then you also get like a little intermediary storyline to connect the two. So, you know, much like Final Fantasy III on the DS, this will probably be my next PSP game I play, because I've been jonesing for some Final Fantasy. So, unfortunately, if I play this, Final Fantasy III might get pushed back again for something else. But I've been really wanting to get to this because I want to, you know, I've never beat Final Fantasy IV, and I really want to beat it. So this is going to be the way I beat it, so I can play the After Years. Another way you can get Final Fantasy IV is Final Fantasy Chronicles, which also has a port of Chrono Trigger, which back in the day this was the cheapest way to get Chrono Trigger, but this port kind of sucks because it has slowdown. I don't remember if the Final Fantasy IV port has as much slowdown as Chrono Trigger does. But, you know, this is a straight port of the Super Nintendo game with just some, like, enhanced CG graphics. I can't think of... Oh, there was a DS remake of Final Fantasy IV kind of in the same graphical style as this. I didn't pick it up because I'm not a big fan of the graphical style, but I wanted to play Final Fantasy III, so... And then we missed out on one of the greatest Final Fantasies ever made for a long time. This is Final Fantasy V, you know, where once again, where the storyline in 4 was just astounding and amazing for that time. The storyline in this one kind of takes a backseat to the gameplay again. This, you know, introduced probably one of the best versions of the Final Fantasy job system that has been out there. You know, I still haven't played this version. This is the original Japanese cart. The version I played the most was the Game Boy Advance version. And I remember playing this so long, and I just wanted to max out like every job. Every time I play an RPG, I always want to complete it like to 100%, and then I get into it, and I'm like, oh god, I don't want to do this anymore. But I was grinding out jobs, and I forgot where I was supposed to go next. So I just sat it down and, you know, left it, and now when I get back to it, I'm going to have to start it all over again. But this is a fantastic Final Fantasy, and it's a shame we missed out on it back in the Super Nintendo days. You know, you can get it on the Game Boy Advance. It is on Final Fantasy Anthology for the PlayStation. However, you have to play this version on the PS1. There's something about the memory cards. They don't work with the PS2. So make sure you have a PS1 if you get this version. But I don't think Final Fantasy V has really been ported out on anything else, which is a shame because this is a great one, and you know, with it being on the Game Boy Advance and the PlayStation 1 and Super Famicom, it's kind of hard to get a hold of. I'm not sure if they released it on like PSN or anything, but get this, guys, this is probably one of the best Final Fantasies out there. So I'm not sure how long the time went on that. I feel like I kind of burned through that really quickly, But in part 2, I'm going to talk exclusively about my favorite Final Fantasy of them all, which is Final Fantasy VI. So I'll see you then.